I'm setting a timer here.
You wanted to have it here, but that's too loud. Yeah, right. He's like, you have to hold it there. Okay, I'm holding it here. There, right. Exactly? Exactly, there. Okay, cool. All right. What about this? All right, okay, yeah. So I'm starting a timer here because this is a new talk, and I don't know how long it's going to take, so I'm going to learn now. It's going to be interesting. Do I want to rate the countdown timer? No, thanks. No, I just want to start it. Okay, cool. Do you recommend people to do that kind of stuff? Have these things that pop up and ask? No, okay. Just wondering if I should blame you, right? Okay. Let's do a warm-up exercise. Are you ready? Yeah. Right. Do you feel warmed up? Right. The theme was flow, right? Yeah, we got a little bit of flow. But that's not what I'm going to talk about. What I'm going to talk about is about time, although there's some relationship between time and flow. How many of you catch yourself thinking, I don't have time. Yeah, got so much stuff to do. How do I find the time? Right? Darn. I get that question a lot, like, how do you find the time? As if I'm some kind of guy who finds the time, like, there it is, right? It's a little bit strange question if you think about it, right? How much time do you have? 8 hours. You have 8 hours? Anybody have any more? He has that much. How much time do you have? She has 24 hours per day. Cool. I do too, actually. That's really cool. We're like the same, right? Anybody else have 24 hours per day? It's funny to think about time because time is like the ultimate predictable, fairly distributed resource. We all have, on a given day, exactly the same amount of time, regardless of your role, which country you live in, what you're doing. It's 24 hours per day. And then in a year, you have what? Last time I checked, 8,700 or so hours. You get them for free. Some people say time is money, but it's not. It's free. You can just sit here and stare at the wall and boop, you get another hour after a while, right? Just wait 60 minutes and boop, there's another hour. It's great. Every day. Just someone's throwing hours at you. So where do you find the time? Yeah, sit around, right? It's right there. 8,700 in a year. And in a lifetime, somewhere around 600,000, maybe 700,000, depending on your habits and a bit of luck, right? So yeah, there's plenty of time. That's not the problem. We don't need to worry about finding the time. Instead, the issue is, of course, what do I do with it, right? What am I doing with the time? So that's a little bit what this is about. And I'm going to do it in the form of telling a bunch of stories. Because to me, this is actually a really important topic because thinking about time differently has made quite a big difference for me personally. Rewind back to my first startup. This is around 2000. So I'm in a startup called Goyada. We were building mobile services. And what happens with startups as they grow, this was a typical .com kind of rocket startup. We brought in all these, venture capital and people throwing money at us. You got to hire a lot of people because hiring people makes your company more valuable. Okay, what's wrong with that statement? There's some weirdness with saying that hiring more people equals your company's worth more. But anyway, that's what we were doing. We hired people, and what happens when you're a developer in a startup? You're the one developer out of the 4 founders, and then suddenly you have a lot of people hired. What happens to you as the tech guy? You become a manager. Has that happened to anybody here? You recognize that? I hate when that happens, right? I was a happy coder, and suddenly I'm a manager. And I got people all over the place. People. Like 20 of them. I was like, okay, I'm not like that. But it was a little bit weird, and I didn't know at the time that there is actually something called management. There's something called leadership, and you can learn about it. And there are like tricks and tools and patterns. I didn't know any of that. I'm just like, oh, so now I'm supposed to try to get my hands out of the code and think about these people and what they're doing. It was actually quite interesting, but I felt like a total noob, and I was a total noob. It took me about a year to get my hands out of the code, enough to be able to start focusing on the team. Right? And I was quite stressed. I didn't quite notice it, but when you're in a startup that grows very quickly and your role changes, you get quite stressed. So I'm running in the hamster wheel, right? Running in the hamster wheel. And then at some point, I actually managed to kind of get things under control a little bit, in the sense that I got my hands out of the code. I could focus just on leadership and management. And I was pretty happy. I found this really cool thing called extreme programming. I needed some way to structure the work, some way of, because we were a bunch of people, how do we want to work? And someone told me, hey, Henrik, you should check this out. There's this thing called XP. Like, oh, this seems to fit us. Let's do this. And that was kind of my introduction into what we call Agile. But anyway, so things were kind of ticking along, and suddenly I had, more control over my time. So I'm sitting at my desk, feeling pretty good about myself, right? And then somebody comes up to me and says, so Henrik, can you sign this paper? Like, oh, what is it about? Oh, we want to buy a new printer. Okay, so should I sign it or not, or should I ask questions about it, or should somebody else be making this decision or not, or should I be, what should I, and I'd be kind of freaking out over this little decision. And finally, I made some decision just to get rid of it. And somebody else come, hey, I want to go on vacation next month. Like, can I do that? Like, I got stuck. Something was weird. My decision process broke. Does anybody recognize that? Yeah? What does that mean when your decision process breaks? What? It's not my problem. It was my problem. I was feeling bad. That's a problem to me, right? What do you think that the cause of that problem is? Yeah, I didn't really realize that at the time, but I was very lucky because one of the guys in my staff, he told me this interesting story. When I told him about this, it's kind of weird. Why am I having trouble making really simple, trivial decisions? And he said, and he told me this long story about, it was his burnout story, right? What happened was he was an entrepreneur as well, and he was working very hard. And one day he fainted, and he woke up in the hospital with a drip. It's called drop, right? And he stayed in the hospital for many months. He was broken. He lost his family. He lost his job. He had to restart completely. And what he told me was, Henrik, this is the last step. This is the last thing that happens, and you're gone. I was like, holy shit, right? I'm glad he told me. So I didn't quite crash into the wall, but it was very close. That very day, I gathered my whole staff and said, guys, I'm going to take a break now, right? So you'll have to, who wants to be CTO? Okay, good luck. I went to the management team, the steering, or the board of directors, and said, so I'm taking a break. This guy's a CTO. They were very supportive. They realized the alternative would have been Henrik burns out. Who wins? Nobody, right? So I just left. I went home. And I slept, and I slept, and I slept, and I slept, and I slept. It feels like all I did was sleep. And I woke up and kind of like a zombie, wandered around in my robes, like ate some food, went back, slept. Very weird. And it was very nice not to have to think about work. I felt like those guys will manage that fine. Which, by the way, is really weird. Isn't it weird how we always think that, oh, I'm so important, right? If I'm not here, stuff won't get done. If I'm gone for 3 hours during the day, then all kinds of bad stuff is going to happen. And then suddenly something like this happens, and I'm gone, and hey, actually, they're managing fine without me. What the heck? Should I be happy or sad about that? I'm not sure, but... But anyway, so after about a month, or I think it was even 2 months, of basically being some kind of a vegetable at home, but not like I was functioning. I just needed that break badly. I started getting bored, right? I'm like, okay, now what? Right? I'm starting to feel kind of awake. I'm like, well, I want to do something. Started getting curious. How's that company doing, right? So I started getting back in touch, and finally I decided that I'm going to try to come back. But I'm not going to take on that role again because it's a very, in that kind of environment, CTO role is very kind of, you got to be everywhere. It's a risk zone, right? The risk of multitasking is quite high, and multitasking is a terrible, it increased the risk of stress and burnout. So and the guy who took over my job was doing fine with that. So I asked him, hey, how about if I, do something simple like project management? Wait, I didn't. Sorry about that, didn't mean that. That just came out, right? So just having to run this one, in that case, rather simple project, one little thing. All I care about is that one thing, and I don't care if you want to go on maternity leave and you want to go do this, and if somebody wants to buy a printer, don't care, right? This one project. The weird thing was I came in and I felt like Superman. It was this really weird feeling coming back in, and I'm like, damn, these guys are all zombies. I saw zombies sitting around, right? People who are tired, unfocused, right? And I felt like Superman. I could come in and in 3 hours I've just done everything that needs to get done, like I can go home, right? I can help other people do their job because they're zombies. And I'm Superman. It was really weird. So that's when I learned that you can work less and achieve more. Like really. Achieve a lot more and work a lot less if you're not a zombie. And I realized that, damn, this is how most people are without noticing it in this state of, so the model we typically have for burnout is you're perfectly fine until suddenly you're burned out. It's this binary state. But I think most of us are in this gray area in between, semi-burned out. So that was a big aha for me. Anyway, so let's fast forward a little bit. A bunch of years later, I kind of started doing more and more of this Agile stuff, and I ended up as interim CTO again. Some people don't learn, right? So I'm in this role again at a game development company in Stockholm. I'm interim, so I'm a consultant. Came in, and you come in, you have fresh eyes, right? And guess what I saw? Zombies. Came in, I saw zombies, very hardworking zombies, building a product that didn't work, crashed every day. People got burned out. When I came in, I've heard that there are some people that have just been burned out, they're gone. Like real burnout, not my kind of pseudo burnout, like really scary. And now I'm their manager. I feel responsible for them, right? Some of these people have families, what the hell? Working really long hours. One of the first things that happened when I came in was, this was a game development company. We built like poker engines, for example, other things like that. We crashed the national poker tournament in Sweden. Great. And we're all over Expressen and Aftonbladet. They're like talking about how crap we are, right? And that was my third day as manager. So I'm like, okay, I have some options here. I can either leave this case, or I can run at their pace and get burned out again, or I can change things. So I asked people, I started interviewing people, and I asked them, so what needs to change? And what they told me was, anything can change, and it'll be better. That's what they told me. Do anything at all, and things will get better. All right. So that's when I decided to go all out with Scrum and XP in that case, because it felt like this would address some of their concerns, I think. That was my guess, and they were very positive about it. So we did that. And what happened was, to me, nothing less than a miracle. I was absolutely amazed at what happened. My expectations were that we're going to try this. It's probably not going to work. It's probably too late because people are kind of burned out. Our product is not working. We're probably going to get shut down as a department. But what the heck? What do we have to lose, right? So we started really doing kind of Scrum and XP by the book. And what happened was, after a few months, I'll spare you the details, but after a few months, we have these Scrum teams humming along, right? We have tests. We have Slack. We have teams that are not overcommitted. They have time, right? They're working normal hours. They're working like 40 hours. They're going home, right? And they're building better stuff than before. They're building more stuff before, and they're building it faster, and they're not being bogged down by crashes. Now it's going to look like, it might sound like that was a simple journey. Of course it wasn't. It was turbulence. But the net effect after 3 or 4 months was these guys are, again, working less and achieving more. So it's a big aha. The scary thing was I didn't understand why. Why did that work? So that's why I started getting interested in the whole thinking behind these Agile methods, because sometimes it doesn't work, right? But in that case, it did. Right. So after that engagement, I was there for about 1.5 years, right? At some point, I just remember this scene of me lying in bed because I was a little bit sick. It wasn't nothing serious, just a bit of a fever or something. So it was a Friday, and I'm lying in bed, So sometimes when you're sick, your brain is warped, right? You can't think. But in that case, I was actually feeling pretty clear in my head, but my body was warped. It's just feverish, right? So I'm lying in bed like, now what? And I caught myself spinning around in my head, thinking about everything I learned in this company. Like, we did so many interesting things. Wow, I should write some of it down before I forget. And so I grabbed my laptop and started just typing. So what did we do? Yeah, we did that. We did this. I started looking at some old photos because I have a habit of taking photos all over the place. So I looked at photos. Oh, that's right. We did that and we did that. That was interesting. I just started writing. And I got into some kind of a creative, I don't know, I'm sure if flow is the right term. Flow on steroids. Like hyper flow. The kind of crazed state I think you maybe only can get into if you have a fever. Not sure. So I'm sitting there typing like an absolute madman without even hardly pausing to breathe. And this is not work. That was not work to me. That was flow, right? It was, I have stuff in my head, I want to get it out, and man, it feels good to get it out, right? So why the heck did that happen? Right. Nice picture, huh? Anyway, so, oh, that's what happened. Wake up. Okay. So where was I? Yeah, so I'm lying in bed typing along, and a very supportive wife comes in and gives me food sometimes. And I fall asleep sometimes and wake up and keep typing. So I pretty much type for 3 days straight, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, just typing. Literally pretty much just typing when I wasn't sleeping or eating a sandwich. And then afterwards, I'm like on Sunday evening, I'm like, what the heck have I just done? What is this? What is this thing? I'd never write before. What is this thing? It's an article. No, it's not. It's a blog entry. I didn't have a blog. What should I create a blog? What do I do with this thing? And I read through it like on Monday. I'm like, this is actually good. I should let others read this. I should do something with this. So I put it out on a mailing list, a Scrum development mailing list, because there's a lot about Scrum. And people told me, you should spread this. You should put this up. You should do something with this. I'm like, oh, well, okay. So I ended up it ended up as a mini book on InfoQ. And this one, Scrum and Extra from the Trenches, it became a book, which was a bit of a surprise to me. That wasn't the plan, right? But it became a book, and I felt very proud of it. I feel pretty proud of it even today, except there are some parts of it I'd like to rip out, but that's a separate story. So there will be, at some point, probably a follow-up, where I can't change the story because I'm just describing what we did, but I can reflect on it. So I'm probably going to do a version of this called the Updated Scrum and Extra from the Trenches, and there's going to be speech bubbles with me reflecting on what's in it. So then I can say, I ripped this chapter out, for example. And that's the chapter on focus factor and all the time bullshit, right? Okay. So anyway, so I put this out, right? And let's see. Yeah, the big aha was, how did that happen? I just wrote like a book, okay, a short book, but a book in a weekend. You don't do that. That's not normal, right? This is crazy. Why was that? Because I was sick. Well, that's stupid. Do you have to become sick to write a book fast? That doesn't make sense. So that planted a seed in my head that there's something about having time or making time or something about Slack, something about focus. I started getting curious about this. But anyway, as a result of this thing coming out, that became a career-changing moment because now a bunch of people started calling and say, hey, Henrik, we read this book here, so can you come and help us with our journey because we're doing something similar. I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. So I would come over and they would be trying to do something similar and I would help them in whatever way I can. And I kind of stumbled into this role that today would be called Agile Coach, which was, again, stumbling into a role that I knew nothing about. So like I told you about being a manager, and I didn't know anything about management. I'll learn that later. Same thing with a coach. After like 5 years of doing coaching, I realized there's something called coaching, and you can study it. You can learn it. Like, interesting. So anyway, but it was very interesting. And the more I learned by helping companies, I also liked sharing the stories, right? So I put up sometimes I created a blog, right? Started putting stuff up, and that generated more engagements, and then people wanted me to teach, so I started teaching, and it created this kind of positive spiral of talks, teaching, and coaching, where each one feeds into the other, which after a while started leading to, guess what? Something bad. Stress. After a while, I'm like, wait a sec, I recognize this feeling. It's not a good feeling. It's like, so I'm going around all over the place, and the good thing about having a near burnout experience, who here has had a near burnout experience? Right, that's quite a lot. Who feels kind of stressed in general now? You can be honest, right? It is very common. It's very, very common. So if you have, one takeaway of this talk is that symptom, right? If you notice that your trivial decision-making process is breaking, that's the last thing, right? You're about to crash. So pull the plug now, right? Really important. I was lucky to have someone tell me that, so now I've told you. But anyway, yeah, I was like, stress is not good. And plus, this thing, I don't want to wait till next time I'm sick in order to create something cool and useful. So I should make time for this, right? I should make time for it. So I decided to block out 1 day per week and say, this is a day, I wasn't sure what to call it, so I called it a slack day for myself. I just block it out of my calendar. It's a day where I don't do anything for anybody. I don't go to a client, I don't do a talk, I don't teach. I'm home, right? And I experimented a bit with that, and what I finally decided what it actually means is I may be working that day. I may be doing email, maybe doing boring stuff, or I may be just sleeping, or I may be reading a book, or I may be preparing a talk, or whatever. I may be making a song in the studio. I don't know. The rule was, it is not decided up front what I will do that day. That's my definition of a slack day, right? It's not decided up front what I'm going to do, therefore I block out the whole day. So I did that, and it was really amazing what an impact that had in my general feeling, my lifestyle, my focus. So I decided to increase it to 2. So I increased it to 2. And believe it or not, I've had that principle now for the past 5 years. So now what I typically do is, going ahead like 6 months in my calendar, I just plop in Slack, put it in all over the place. And okay, so that sounds kind of crazy. Why was that so important? Well, what actually happened was something very subtle. I forced myself to prioritize, right? Now I suddenly had only 3 days in which to be available to book stuff up, right? The other 2 days were unbookable. And what that means is I can no longer tell people I don't have time. If somebody calls me and they want my help, and I can't tell them I don't have time, because why? What? I have the 2 Slack days. I would lie to them if I told them I don't have time, right? That would be a lie. I do have time. I just choose not to use that time to go to a client that day. So I had to change the way I communicate in order to not feel like some liar, right? So I practiced to not say I don't have time at all. I really try not to say it. And if you ever hear me say it, call me out on that, right? I try never to write or to say or even to think I don't have time. Instead, I try to change it. Wait a sec. I was about to say I don't have time. What did I really mean? I don't have capacity. Or my travel schedule is full because I limit my travel schedule, right? Or maybe this doesn't fit my priorities right now, or something, right? Just something better than just I don't have time, because that's just lying to yourself and to the world. So now I had to prioritize. 3 days per week, I have to be better at saying no, and in order to be better at saying no, I need to have some kind of some principles for prioritizing, right? Which means I suddenly have to examine my own values. What do I want? What's important to me, right? Oh, that's a hard question. I don't know. How many of you would be able to answer that question easily if I asked you, what's important to you? Hand up. A few. Yeah, a few. It's really useful to think about, right? So that became very explicit. I have to have some thought. So to me, I think it was something on the line of, I want to learn stuff and I want to help companies improve. That's interesting to me, right? Now my party line is more like, help the good guys win. But whatever. It doesn't really matter. Just some kind of filter. It was a little bit more detailed than that. It was something about how many travel days I want to have per year, what kind of companies I want to help, etc. Yeah, what I noticed happened as a result of that was, it gave me a vent, a way to catch up on stuff. Sometimes, no matter how well you try to plan, especially when you're an independent consultant, you kind of don't have much of a routine, sometimes you get overflow. You planned wrong, right? And suddenly, oh shit, this took longer than I thought, or some client popped up that I wasn't. Yeah. Something happens and your planning screwed up. Now I have to sacrifice a Slack day, right? That's fine. It's better than sacrificing an evening or a weekend, because that's what would happen before. So when I filled up my week with client work, the overflow would be the evenings and weekends. And since I had family and kids, that kind of hurts, right? So that was nice. It gave me a place for the overflow to end up, which was Slack days. So Slack days would sometimes be sacrificed, which was okay. But most importantly, Slack became a place where flow can happen, right? I don't know any way to create flow. We got some good ideas earlier today, how to create, but I don't believe you can create flow. I think you can create an environment where you maximize the likelihood of flow. But most importantly, you can create an environment which allows you to catch the flow when it shows up. To me, it's like a train that pops up out of nowhere. It just pops in, right? Oops, here's a flow train, right? It can happen in the middle of the night. I wake up in the morning and I notice that there's an article in my head that wants to pop out, or a video, right? And then I either have Slack that day or I don't. And if I don't have Slack that day, that train departs. It's gone. Normally it doesn't come back. It's gone. right? So I missed that flow train. Bummer. But since I have normally 1 or 2 days per week that are empty, chances are the flow train will hit me on one of those days, and then I can catch it. And then I can do stuff in 1 day that maybe would have taken a month otherwise. It's quite amazing what happens when you catch that flow train. You can just sit there and do it. Okay, so maybe what I otherwise would have done that day was catch up on emails, and now or plan a trip, right? Maybe that's what I otherwise would have done, and now I didn't do that. Well, okay, I'll do that next Slack day, right? So it gives you some way to be flexible. So if I've become somewhat of a flow junkie, right? I need my flow fix every week, or I don't feel good. Okay, so what happened next? Well, some good stuff came out of that, various videos. Another book, Kanban and Scrum. It would never have existed if I hadn't found the Slack. A lot of stuff that just wouldn't have happened. But what's interesting, what happened later on though was my stress got under control, which was great. But I noticed the next bad thing, right, was that I was traveling a lot, little trips here and there, right? Traveling is fun. But I noticed that often I'd catch myself being somewhere far off, and then someone contacts me from Stockholm and says, hey, a really interesting company X says, can you come and help us? And I'm like, oh man, I would love to come and help this really interesting company X. But I can't because my calendar is full of little trips here and there, right? It's shot to pieces. So that happened quite often, that I had to decline things that I really wanted to do that would have been local in Stockholm. So I'd be somewhere way off somewhere in the world doing something that I could have just as well have been doing in Stockholm for the same or even more pay and get home and meet my kids that evening, right? So I realized there's something wrong with this. That's when I bumped into a book called The Answer. Ooh. Anybody read that book called The Answer? Probably. Yeah, it's a good book. Of course, it's a little bit over the top, but it has a good message in it, which is basically it's a guy who's been traveling around talking to neuroscientists and psychologists, mainly neuroscientists, trying to find out what is the cool stuff that they're learning that hasn't come out yet, right? What are they seeing, especially around positive psychology? What was the term again? Where are you? What was the term? Positive. What? He went home. Slack, right? Did anybody get his beer ticket? Yeah, right. So anyway, the thing that successful sportsmen do when they're envisioning themselves winning the race, right? They're envisioning themselves doing that, and that seems to help. It seems to increase the odds. Why? Right? Why does that seem to work? So he did a lot of research on that and talked to a bunch of people, and this book came out, and I'm really bad at explaining it, so I explain it kind of like I would explain to a 5-year-old. So, but that's how I remember it. The basic idea there was that our brain gets bombarded with input, right? Through all of our senses, all the time. It's crazy. Just pure amount of data that just flows in all the time. And the basic tenet there in the book is that the biggest part of the brain is the unconscious. It does stuff without you noticing it, such as making sure you breathe, making sure making sure the heart beats, which is a good thing. Right? But then there's this little part which is the conscious part of the brain, right? Which actually, you can notice your thoughts popping in there. So how does, of all the billions of pieces of data that pop into your head, some very small slice of that enters your conscious brain and you actually notice it, right? It's a cocktail party effect. You're at a cocktail party, blah, 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 lots of noise, and then you notice someone's talking about dogs, like, dogs, maybe because you're interested in dogs. Or maybe you start noticing what kind of clothes people are wearing. Or maybe you notice what music is playing. But you won't notice everything. There's going to be some things you just pick up, right? And why did that particular, out of all the data, why did that particular stuff get, propagated into your conscious brain? Well, the rest was just unconscious. I didn't notice the color of that rug or whatever, right? Why is that? Well, it turns out there's this another part of the brain, which I never remember the names for these parts, right? But this little thing that you might call a search filter, like a living search filter, which of all the data that comes in, it's going to decide what part do I tell the conscious brain about, right? What do I actually notice? It's like a search filter that filters away lots of other stuff. And what's interesting about search filter, what is it I notice? Well, that's based on my interest and my self-identity, right? If I am a smoker, I'm not a smoker, but if I'm a smoker, I can imagine that I would notice other people smoking. I would notice the smell of smoke sometimes, and I might, hey, you might notice, hey, that's a good place to go have a smoke, right? notice things like that, while a non-smoker might not think about it. So it depends on your personal identity, your habits, and your interests. A person interested in music might notice that, hey, that's an interesting rhythm, right, that song. So, okay, fine, that might sound kind of obvious, but what's interesting is you can hack this search filter. That's when it gets interesting. You hack the search filter. And the way you do that is by visioning. When you imagine then you're pretty much kind of starting to program this filter that's what I want to be. And it turns out that, I know I'm very oversimplifying things, but it's a very useful model. All models are wrong, but some are useful, right? This one is useful. Is that, that the subconscious part of the brain only understands now. There's no notion of the past or the future, it's just now. While the conscious brain, that's when you can reason about the past, the future. So what's interesting is what they've, what he says in the book is that if you're going to hack that search filter, you can only reason in the terms of now, right? If you tell yourself, I'm going to stop smoking, what the subconscious hears is smoking, right? There's no notion of not or past or future or I will start exercising. There's no, what is will? That doesn't understand that. But if you imagine yourself being something else, then that seems to work a bit better, right? So that's where it comes in. Like a good example would be, suppose I'm out driving, and I decide to have lunch in this sushi restaurant that I've never been at before. I just felt I'm going to have lunch there today, right? And there I happen to bump into somebody from Google, and we start talking, and maybe it ends up that I get a job at Google, which is what I've always wanted to have a job at Google, and what a coincidence, I just bumped into this restaurant. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe if I've been thinking a long time, I've been imagining myself working at Google. Cool, I am the guy who works at Google, right? I'm imagining that. Then maybe what happened was, last week, I was driving past that place, and my subconscious mind noticed that there's somebody there sitting with a Google t-shirt. And there's often somebody there with a Google t-shirt. My conscious mind had no idea, right? But the subconscious mind has kind of built a connection between that place and Google, and that's a good thing. It kind of marks that as a good thing, right? Conscious brain, completely unaware. But then at some point I'm like, I feel like going to a new place. I think I'll just go to there. And you think it was random, but it wasn't, right? It's a silly example, but those are the kind of things that seem to be happening, right? So by changing the search filter, you increase the likelihood of noticing the types of stuff that's going to move you in the right direction. Right? So, okay, I decided to try this out. So I'm sitting, I realize, I'm all fractured, I'm being in all the different places at once, and I'm missing out on interesting gigs at home. So I took out a piece of paper and I wrote on the top, I wish I had that paper, but I lost it. My perfect client, : underscore, right? What is my perfect client? I'm imagining myself going to the perfect gig in Stockholm. Right? It is part-time. I want to be there a couple of days per week, but not full-time, right? On my slack days. They're building something that's good for society, so I can feel that I'm contributing, right? No more gambling companies, right? Something useful. And they have interest in technology, right? Not too far from home. Well, I put up this list of like 10 points. They pay decently. They don't have to pay a lot, but decently, etc. And I'm like, good, that's it. I'm working at this company. Cool. Which one is it? Which company is that? I have no idea. But let's just suppose they exist, and this is the client that I have, right? I'm imagining that. And then this big thought struck me. Oh, shit. What if this client calls me tomorrow? And they say, Henrik, can you come and help us? What do you think would happen? I would have to say I can't. Because my stupid calendar is full of little trips, right? So that's the big aha. I realized that, of course, I have to at least enable the possibility of getting this client, right? So I started adding a whole lot more slack at that time, almost like taking a vacation. I would cut down on all non-essential engagements, and I figured that, okay, worst case is I don't find this client, and then I get some extra vacation and a little bit less income for that period. Best case is this client shows up, right? So that's what I did. Within a few weeks, by some weird coincidence, this client shows up. Ended up being at Rikspolisstyrelsen. I ended up in a really interesting project called Pust, which of course was followed by another project, which is also interesting for a different reason. Pust is two different projects. Pust Java, which was actually pretty successful and interesting, and then there's Pust Civil, which was an absolute disaster. But that's an interesting. That's a different story. So anyway, I ended up in this really interesting project, which fulfilled every point on this list. I was like, wow, that's amazing. And what also turned out to happen was it worked out really well. And I don't think that was a coincidence, because I wanted that gig because I think I could contribute in that context. So when I came there, I can make a big difference, as opposed to if you come to a company that wants you to do something that you can't do, or a company that's not really willing to change. There's all these reasons why a gig might not turn out. But here was like a company where they were doing pretty okay. They had most of the success factors were already in place before I came in, but I could give them that little extra nudge, right, to help them succeed even better. I felt great. And I learned a whole lot of stuff. And because of the magic of Slack, I managed to write another book, which I never would have done without the Slack. It's called Lean from the Trenches. It follows the same style as Scrum and XP from the Trenches, but this is all about scaling, right? And of course, what that did was speed up that hamster wheel again. It's kind of the downside. You put up material, you're like, feel good about it. But the problem is, if it really is good, then people will start calling you a lot, and like, oh shit, now we've got to prioritize even better. It's really hard, right? Okay, so let's see. Where was I? Yeah, so I made another decision. WIP limit, right? I don't want to have a bunch of different clients. I want to have one main client. One main client, WIP limit of 1. Then I could do a bunch of side things, smaller things, but one main client, get a sense of continuity. It was this for a while. After that, it became Skype for a while. But at some point, inspired by this book that I'd read, The Answer, right? And the experiment that I did that panned out surprisingly well. I was like, so this, at least in the one case I really tried it, it actually worked. And I thought back in the past, and I could sense situations where this kind of seems to have worked in the past as well, when you envision yourself wanting to do something. For example, I've tried to exercise more. Does anybody recognize that? I've tried to exercise. I tried to fool myself into thinking that I'm a guy who exercises a lot. That actually failed, right? But I found another trick. You see, you got to try these things. I think envisioning the success story doesn't guarantee success, of course, but it increases the odds, right? So I increased the odds of becoming a guy that exercised a lot, but that didn't happen. Second best would be, okay, but I'm a guy that gets a lot of vardagsmotion, which I cannot translate. Daily exercise without exercise, and the little things like taking the stairs instead of the elevator, right? So as opposed to going to the gym. So I don't run off and do jogging. I don't go to the gym. It's boring. And whenever I try it, I stop after a while. But what I'm really good at now is the little daily things, right? I try to walk around as much as possible, take the stairs instead of the elevator. And because I fooled myself, I fooled my search filter into that, I just, my default is if I walk into a place and there's an elevator, there's stairs, I'll unconsciously just take the stairs without noticing it, unless I'm with somebody and they're taking the elevator. So it's interesting how you can kind of, in that case, I managed to hack my brain, and my habits are different because of that. And I think it's also contributing to health. But yeah, so hacking doesn't always work, but this is a good, useful model for how to hack your brain. So anyway, yeah. So there's this moment in 2010 or 2011, I'm sitting and talking with my wife, right? And we asked this really interesting question, which is really useful to talk with your spouse about, which is, if we could do anything we want, what would we do, right? It's a cliche, but has anybody tried that? You ask your spouse, hand up if you had that conversation. Not as many as I would have thought, right? It's really interesting. If we could do whatever the heck we want, what would it be? And we concluded that, like I've been traveling a lot, and traveling is really fun. You get to really cool places, but quite often without being able to share it with my family. So I'm like, we talked about it. We're like, okay, it'd be cool to travel as a whole family together, like a long trip, maybe for a year, right? Go all over the place. That would be really cool. Yeah, we're imagining this thing. And then, of course, we're like, yeah, but we can't do that, of course, because of 18 different reasons why we can't. Because of school, because of money, because of the house, because of all this, the bands, all this stuff, right? The hamster, right? All these things, right? And then we immediately caught ourselves. Oh, wait a sec, that's dumb. We can't think in terms of why we can't. If we could, would we want to? Yes, we would. If we did it, when would we do it? When would be the right timing? If not now, when? That's also a powerful question, right? If not now, when? At the time, we had our 4 kids were aged 1, 3, 5, 7, 2-year sprints, right? And we're like, we could wait, but then they're all in school. Then traveling becomes really hard. Or we could wait like 15 years till they're all out of school. And how likely is it that they're all going to want to travel with us? Like 0 probably. So we're like, it became this big shock moment. Like, we either do this now or we do it never. Right? Whoa. So we pretty much decided at that moment that we're going to do it, right? So what has to happen? So all these we can't because turned into, in order to travel, we would have to, and it became a list. Sort out school, rent out our house, figure out all these things. It became a Kanban board at home, right? Just all the stuff we have to sort out. And we set a date, like 9 months in the future. Just set a date. We leave that date, period. We don't know where, right? But we know we'll be gone for 6 to 12 months. And we just set that as a constraint. Yeah, then of course, putting that board up, making a decision that we're leaving, telling people that we'll be gone during this period, so don't count on us, right? One of the things on the list was, I don't want to be working a lot while traveling with 4 kids. I mean, it's hard enough just traveling, right? So I'll have to reduce my commitments a lot. So this became like inverted slack, right? The vision I set up was, I'm on the road. This was the new vision, right? I'm on the road. I drew a picture of a calendar. I'm working 2 days per month in whatever country I'm in because it brings in a bit of income, but also because it puts me in contact with locals, right? So a couple of days per month. That's going to generate a little email, some email stuff. So, but I want to be able to go to places where there's no internet. So 2 hours per week, that became the constraint. Email 2 hours per week, 1 day per week. Drew up this calendar. It looked very silly compared to my actual calendar, but yeah, gradually it's okay. Now I have to get out of a lot of commitments. So I basically started. I had time. We had 9 months, so we started getting out of a lot of commitments. But to make a long story short, oh yeah, another interesting thing about visions. We got together as a family and we started playing with Google Images. That was quite fun. We're like, imagine that the trip is done, trip is finished. How does our photo album look like? Right? How does our photo album look like after the trip? So we all started Googling and printing out pictures. I put up this picture of like sailing. Someone put up a picture of elephants. Someone put up a picture of pigeons on a torii. I don't know why that was interesting, but my son put up a double-decker bus. Like, okay, little stuff. But anyway, and that became the vision. So on the board we had the vision, all the stuff printed out. We don't have to do this stuff. It's not a backlog. It's just a vision. And then we have the to-dos. And we some of them, some are must, some are should, some are could, right? I don't think we did a single one of the coulds, but and a constraint, a hard constraint. We're leaving that date, period, right? So all that together really helped. And when we did the trip, it was wonderful. It pretty much worked out exactly as planned. I was amazed. It was. I thought it would have been a lot more difficult. It wasn't. I think part of it was luck because kids go through different phases, and sometimes they're in a real painful phase. And either we were lucky and they didn't go through a painful phase during the trip, or maybe they thought traveling was fun and they postponed the painful. I don't know. But it was really interesting because when we came back from the trip, we looked at the photo album and we're like, this looks just like that. It was amazing. It looked just like that. We had the elephants, we had the sailing, we didn't have the pigeons on the but just about everything else was there. I was like, really interesting. Even though we didn't intentionally try to check everything off, that's what ended up happening. So really fascinating. All right. So I came back from the trip, right? And I was very careful to not take on engagements for after the trip because I didn't want to come back with a full calendar. I wanted to do a calendar reset, come back. So I came back from the trip, and now we're in April 2012 or something like that. And weird. The calendar is empty. We're home, right? And I don't have to do lots of, travel-y things today. Like we have, the kids are in school, and I'm sitting here at home, and my calendar is empty. My inbox is full, of course, but my calendar is empty. And I said, this is a unique opportunity for me to think about what do I actually want to do. Again, right? We all have time. It's just a matter of what I want to spend the time on. And now I had this unique opportunity of not being reactive. It's like, interesting. So I decided to continue with Skype, which was my client before the trip. Continue working with them. A month or so in, I started realizing, wait a sec, there's something wrong. It's weird how sometimes you got all the external things, you can check them all off, right? But still doesn't feel right. I noticed when I went home from a day at work, I wasn't feeling like, yeah. It was more like, eh. And I wake up in the morning, it wasn't like, yeah, I'm going to get up and go to work. It was more like, yeah. So it doesn't matter what the conscious part of your brain is telling you. If the subconscious is telling you that, then it's probably right, okay? So I analyzed and realized maybe it's because, they just got bought up by Microsoft. I'm quite far removed from management. The people I really need to talk to are in London. I would need to travel a lot more if I'm going to really make a difference. So I decided that, no, I'm going to find another client. Find another client. As in not just respond to somebody contacting me, but actually find another client. How do you do that? I didn't really know, right? But I knew one, so I thought I did it again. Took up a piece of paper. What's the perfect client, right? Listed up a bunch of points. And then I started thinking about, And the word that popped into my head immediately after I put the list down was Spotify. It just popped into my head. I was like, yeah. Check. Every point was checked, right? Interesting product that I like to use myself. They're in Stockholm. All the stuff was checked. Plus, I'd worked with them in the past on a fairly regular basis, but just once or twice per year, visited them, follow the Agile journey, pretty much from like 2008. And it's a really fascinating journey, but my part was rather minor. So I picked up the phone and looked up the phone number of the CTO and said, first cold call ever in my life. Like, how does sales work? That kind of thing. Hi. You guys have growth pain, right? Was the only words I could come up with to say. And he said, yeah. So do you want help? He said, yeah. And that was it. That was the sale. That was the shortest sales call ever, right? So I started working 2 days per week, and I've been doing that for the last few years. It's just a company which I've been following. So I drew up the schedule of how do I want the calendar to look like, and that's my vision for every month. I have this template calendar, 2 days of training, teaching, right, something, and then 2 days at Spotify. One thing like this somewhere, because it's fun to get out and do talks sometimes, but not too often, maybe 1 per month, and then Slack. And that gave me a little bit of space to take on other shorter engagements with other clients. That's my template for every month. I don't always succeed with it. Sometimes it turns out totally different, but then I can at least acknowledge the fact that, oh, this last month turned out wrong, right? So what am I going to do differently? It became like a useful template. But anyway, yeah, that's when I started forming this mantra, help the good guys win, became my kind of priorities. Companies that I feel like, I want these guys to succeed. I want to help them. But recently, something has been happening, which is I've been trying to resist taking on too many other clients because I want to keep this whip limit, right? I'm really bad at learning people's names, for example. I don't want to have to learn people's names and lots of new clients. Just focus. The advantage of being with one client a long time is I can see how seeds I planted 3 years ago, I can see how they're panning out now. And that's really interesting. It's never the seeds you think are going to grow that actually grow. Always get surprised, right? The seeds that I've had made the biggest impact at Spotify have been the ones I almost dropped out of my pocket by accident while walking past somebody, right? While the ones I've been focusing on, watering this plant and really taking care of it, turned out to be nothing interesting. So it's really weird. But anyway, what's happened lately is I've started to lose the... I've been worse at avoiding the temptation of working with other clients. So some really interesting companies have been getting in touch, and I'm like, that's really interesting. I really want to work with them. All I have left in my calendar is Slack days. Screw that. So I've been sacrificing a bunch of Slack days and getting a little bit stressed. So now I've been a little bit, my stress level is starting to get up. It's not at a danger level, but it's not where it should be. And I've thought about that, and I realized that I could bring it down again. I could just say no. But actually, I'm happy with these clients, these new clients, companies that I'm really interested in. Companies like Lego. Started working with Lego. It's like the dream company. I was there yesterday. I got to see the factory where they make the toys. Like, wow, it's amazing. Learning a lot. I can't say no. It'd be stupid to say no. So I've sacrificed whatever slack I need to get going with this new client. Probably going to be the new long-term client. But then that begs a lot of questions. So what am I going to do now? Am I going to have is my whip limit 2 now? Right? And some of the questions, plus what am I going to do about the stress? So I decided to, once again, you own your own time. Law of 2 feet, right? That's, by the way, a funny thing. Quite often we're like, yeah, but I don't know my own. I'm not a consultant. I'm an employee. I have to go to work. I have to sign in timesheets, blah, blah, right? And my calendar is full. I can't control my time. Do you buy that? Really? Think about it for a moment. So you got this calendar that's all full, right? You're like, I'm too, this meeting is really important. I have to be there. Right. And then your spouse calls and tells you that your son is in a hospital. There was a car accident. What are you going to do? Yeah, you're going to wipe your calendar. You're going to ignore it. You're going to go to the hospital, right? Doesn't matter what's in there. So yeah, you own your time. You can choose what to do. It's just a matter of prioritizing. There's nothing in there that's more important than you taking control of your life. So anyway, I thought about that. I'm like, shit, okay, I've been sacrificing too much slack lately. I'm getting a bit stressed. I'm going to take a slack quarter. So now I'm going to take a slack quarter, January, February, March. Just slack the whole period, except for some existing commitments, like a course or two. But basically empty. And how do I explain that to people without it sounding really weird? So I sometimes tell people that I'm going to be pappaledig. Kind of true, kind of not. Pappaledig is parental leave. So people are, congratulations, you had a fifth child? Like, no, it's just I do have some papalere dog days left. But they're still going to be in school, so I'm cheating. So yeah, I'll be home much more than before. I'll be taking the kids to school, taking them from school. I'll be there whenever they're home. In that sense, yes, I'm papaleric. But no, I'm not taking them out of school. They're there, so I get a lot of personal time. That's my real incentive. I just say papaleric because people understand that, oh yeah, papaleric, that means you're going to be off the map for a few months. Yeah. So it's just, people, it's socially acceptable. The Slack thing, I have to spend more time explaining. I'm explaining it to you because I have time, right? So now you know when I say papaleric, it's papaleric, right? What am I going to do? I don't know. That's the whole, point of Slack, right? I don't know. Maybe catching up on reading interesting books. Maybe it'll be coding on hobby projects. Maybe it will be playing games. Maybe it will be learning to cook new stuff. Maybe it will, I don't know what it is. Playing more with the kids, I hope. But I really don't know. Maybe a new book will pop up. Maybe this talk will become a book. I don't know. Right? The idea is not to commit to anything. And I thought about that. Yeah, and a calendar reset. That's part of the deal. I can't come back afterwards and have a full calendar. The whole thing is I want to get out of there and start from scratch. Empty calendar. Interesting clients that I worked with in the past. The door is still kind of open. I can continue. My hypothesis is I'll probably continue with Spotify and Lego, but I don't know. So it's just, yeah, we'll see. Calendar reset. Right. So how do you find the time is the question, right? And it's the wrong question. Right? It's really the wrong question because you already have the time. Right? It's just what do you do with it? Right? How do you make the most of the time? That's the interesting question. So I'm going to do a little demo, which is related to this. A little demo. Okay, are you ready for a little demo? This time with real balls, right? I need 5 volunteers to come up behind this table. Three. Ta-da. All right, okay. 4. All right, so one more. Great. 5. Okay, sorry about that. You missed it, yeah. Got to be quick, right? Yeah. So give him a hand for stepping up, right? So see if I can do this while still holding a mic. That's going to be a bit of a challenge. So you guys are a development team, okay? Simulate that you guys are a development team. And this is a feature that you guys are going to develop. It represents a feature, and I'm the customer, okay? It's a feature. And to get this feature done, everybody has to do their part of the job, right? And to do that, it has to pass through all 10 hands. When it's passed through all 10 hands, you put it here. That's in production. This is the, server, right? So, yeah, give it a shot. Just pass it on. Through both hands. Yeah, through both hands. There it goes. They're working hard here, doing a bit of testing. Deploy! Give them a hand. That's great. Yeah. Okay, let's see if we can do one that comes in from here. How are you going to do this now? How are you going to do that? Look at that. Cool. They're pretty fast. How long is it taking to develop a one ball, roughly? 4 seconds? Yeah, they're fast, right? It's pretty repeatable, too. Let's give them a more thorny one, right? And put it right here. How are you going to deal with that one? Look at that. Whoa! Cool. They're really fast. Now the thing is, suppose you're the manager of this team, right? You're a newly hired manager. You sit in a different room, in this case. I'm going to ask you to pause in the middle, right? So when I say pause, just freeze. Okay? Go. Pause. Now they're frozen, right? The manager comes in, opens the door. This is what he sees just right now, right? Closes the door, runs off to a meeting, right? So keep going, right? Freeze, right? No, freeze, I said. Okay, great, you're frozen. Cool. A delay. Oh, there's a delay in the button. Sorry, I should fix that. Right, so it's a frozen moment. Manager comes in, coming back from his meeting in the afternoon. Looks at that, closes the door, moves on. What do you think he might be thinking, this manager? Yeah, well, every time I look in, I only see one person working, and normally with only one hand. Now it's actually 2. That was a grand exception, right? Yeah. I see collaboration. It's quite beautiful, actually. It's a collaboration. Yeah. So, but the manager is like, this is not efficient, right? Resource utilization is horrible. It's about 10%. On average, it's 1 hand out of 10 working. 10% resource utilization. We need to do something about that, right? We're paying these people expensive salaries, etc., right? We should introduce time reports and make sure we get good utilization. So yeah, continue. Let's deliver, right? Now I'm gonna do something about it, right? So as a good manager, I'm now going to make sure that we use our resources efficiently. Keep in mind that every ball, you have to touch it before you deliver it, otherwise it's not finished, right? So that's really important. The quality matters a lot, right? But I'm going to make sure we get more resource utilization. Are you ready? Okay, go. There's an available resource. We have somebody here. Oops, available resource over there, right? We can't have idleness. There's one. Okay, another one. Available resource. Go. There we go. Okay, pause. You can just freeze. That's beautiful, right? Look at that. Manager comes in, opens the door, right? Oh man, look at that. This is like a work of art, right? They're all working really hard. Många bollar I luften, right? Ooh, beautiful. 100% resource utilization all the time except for one. Wait. There. Now it's perfect, right? Yeah. Except for one problem, right? Except for one problem. Right? Empty. Empty. Right? Empty. Customers like, what the heck is going on, right? Yeah. This happens when you do too much stuff. This happens when you have push scheduling. This happens when you don't do things like Scrum properly and you just let stuff flow in. But this also, by the way, thanks for being, they're really, you can deliver, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Give them a hand, right? Yeah. But this is also what happens inside your brain when you're not focused, right? You got all these things in your brain. Nothing's getting done because you're trying to sort everything out. And an email pops in, you're like, oh shit, I got to deal with that. Somebody calls, oh shit, a tweet, Facebook, whatever. Someone knocks on the door, an idea pops into your head, you're like, stuck, right? So I find the kind of, I guess I should put up the core message. Are you ready for the core message of this talk? Because they wanted me to send the slides in advance. So I did send the slide in advance. Here is the slide that I sent them in advance. It's an animated slide. Are you ready? There. That's the slide I sent in advance, right? So, to me, this is the answer to how do you not find time, but how do you make sure you use the time in the right way. The trick that I've learned and institutionalized both in my personal life, but also with my clients and with my teams is put Slack in, right? Because Slack is an enabler of flow. Slack is where flow can happen, right? And there's different ways of doing it. I don't expect everybody to go in and just block off 2 days. It depends a little bit on your context and what you're doing, but I'd be surprised if you can't put in half a day per week. Just go in and, block off. Every Friday afternoon, just a few hours of emptiness, right? Try it. So, yeah, I think that's just about all I had to say, according to my very messy notes here. Reach your goals not by running faster, but by traveling light and by reducing the number of steps, I guess, is my final message. So, yeah, thank you very much.
We have, but you're going to need to talk.
I'm going to need to talk too? Oh.
Okay. Yes.
I thought I was done.
I think we have about 5 minutes for questions. So,
right.
hands.
I was going to give them some slack, but now you just took it away.
Oh.
Right? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't build nearly enough of that into the schedule.
Okay, yeah. Questions?
Well, there is some talk about, reducing the number of work hours. Right now we work in standard 8 hours per day. There are some political parties who advocate 6-hour days instead. Your thoughts about that?
My thought about that is, actually, I'm glad you brought it up because that was one of the things somewhere deep in my notes that I was going to say and forgot to say, so thank you very much. There's time and time, right? Has anybody had that feeling that you came in on the Saturday morning just to catch up on some stuff and in 2 hours you got done like a whole week's worth of work? That sound familiar? Hand up if you've seen that. Right, so 1 hour, that 1 hour was not comparable to that other hour on Tuesday afternoon when you were bombarded with stuff, right? So what I find useful is just abolish the idea. In every place I've been at, whenever I have any kind of authority, I've just abolished the whole idea of trying to regulate when people work. And just say, you're here to help us succeed as a company, you're here to solve a problem, right? Work whenever the hell you feel like it, wherever the hell you feel like it. What normally happens is you get team conventions. So people normally end up working something like a 40-hour week anyway. Some teams, like this team over here, some starts at 8 a.m. and goes home at 3 because he has kids. And the next guy comes in at 11 and leaves at... So they have different work hours. In some cases, the team synchronize the work hours. Some cases, the team have 1 day per week with all work from home. It tends to vary. But I find it very useful to just abolish that notion. So what I did at that first company that I talked about, or more like at the game company where I was interim CTO, people were working overtime. I told them that there's no more overtime compensation because overtime sucks. Why should I compensate for you? Why should I compensate anyone for it? It's bad. So nobody's going to get paid for overtime. Please don't do overtime unless you really badly want to. And if you feel the need to do overtime sometimes because maybe the server crashed, we got to fix it. So then that's a good thing to work overtime in that case, right? Then go ahead and work undertime the next day, right? Or whatever, take a day off, right? Manage your own time instead of me trying to manage and pay you for your hours because, yeah, an hour is not comparable to an hour. What really matters is a motivated hour or a flow hour. Those are the ones you want, and you can't regulate that. So that was a long answer to a short question, but I hope it was useful. Yeah, any other questions?
Oh, look at that. I have the microphone. No, I had a question.
Oh, you had a question, okay.
How do you plan to mitigate the enormous risk of damage to your feet working at Lego?
Damage to my feet.
Sorry, that wasn't a serious. I just had to get
You
it
wear
in there.
thick boots.
Yeah, oh, smart.
They mandate that.
Who had a question?
I have a question. Will you keep your slack days during December, or will you try to squeeze in everything during December?
Ah, you got me. Yeah, December is kind of screwed. Yeah. Mainly because of Lego. I blame them. But yeah, starting up a new client, stuff takes time. I pretty much sacrifice December. So it's a good old vacation syndrome.
Okay, so try to stay healthy during December.
Yeah, I got to survive that last bit, right? We'll see. Calculated risks, right? Yeah. Not so well. Yeah. Turn that a bit.
Should I move?
Yeah. Just turn it a bit.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks.
cool. Go.
The thing that you said about when you answered her question.
Yeah.
Moving
time.
from-
About
yeah, about
the-
time.
about
how many
work hours.
Yeah,
Work hours,
exactly.
yeah.
So it sounds very logical. It sounds very logical thing to say. But if you're only a project manager
Yeah.
and you're not the one working for a project manager, I mean, for instance, if I'm a consultant,
Yeah.
how can I implement it without looking like if I'm not working?
Did I mention that I'm a consultant too?
Yeah.
So, and what's this about making it look like I'm not working? Sorry, please explain the question again.
I mean, you're working for yourself, maybe, but if I'm working in a company, then...
So I work in companies too.
Yeah,
I'm working to help companies improve. So help him out here. There's a question that wants to come out here. What is the question? How do I justify Slack?
Yeah.
Right. That's a really interesting question. How do I justify the Slack? Right. Now, first of all, I charge for by day, right? So on my Slack days, I don't charge the client unless I'm doing work for the client that day. So I basically don't commit to working for the client that day, but I also don't commit to not working for the client that day. So basically, by setting the expectations, they don't expect me to be there 40 hours per week. So a lot of it is about expectation setting. You need to have a dialogue. If your customer really wants you to be there 40 hours per day, you have your options. You can just bend over, do it, or you can argue and try to make a case for that I want to have a Slack a little bit of Slack, or you can find another client. What I can tell you is at my company, Crisp, we've pretty much ever since we started, which was like in the mid-90s, always had Slack. We almost never do 100% engagements. We tell the customer that, so about a half day per week, I won't be here. Already when talking to the client, we say that, because that's when I catch up on stuff or trade knowledge with other consultants. And both of these things benefit you indirectly, and you don't have to pay for the time, right? So far, in my memory, it's very rarely been a problem, as long as we're being upfront about it. Because, yeah, okay, so 90%, not 100%. But yeah, it's a trade-off. 2 days per week might be unacceptable, depending on what you're doing, too. Are you a coder? Or you're a coach? The nature of your work will affect things. But I see really no reason to have to force yourself to be 100% committed to 8-hour work week, or 10 or 40, just because a client insists. You need to decide for yourself what's important to you. Yeah. But also the mindset. I don't think of it as I work for myself. I think of it as I'm working for this customer, trying to help them succeed. But they don't succeed better because I stress. They don't succeed better because I'm carrying 15 balls in my head. They succeed better if I come there with one single ball, them, and just focus on getting that done and then go home. Right? But yeah, it's hard. It's not easy. For me, it has become easy because I set it as a constraint. It's not. It's just a simple constraint, and I adapt everything else around it. Yeah.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
What's your recommendation for Slack for a team? So if we do a sprint, should we have a Slack day each sprint, or what's your recommendation?
Good question. So in Scrum, there is kind of built-in Slack a little bit, because when you do sprint planning, you're not really supposed to fill the sprint. Like, we think we can finish 5 stories, but Scrum is a pull system. The team chooses. So a good team with experience will know that we can finish 5 stories probably, but we'll only bring in 4, right? And what will we do with that extra time? Well, maybe we'll do a 5th story. Maybe one of the 4 stories will turn out to be bigger than we thought. Or maybe we'll use that time to fix the broken build server or whatever. So the team has full ownership over that, and a good team will use that properly. But another way to put that in, which I found very useful if you do Scrum and sprints, is suppose we do a 2-week sprint. I would set it up for Slack by basically saying that, okay, so Monday morning is sprint planning. Thursday afternoon is sprint review. 2 weeks later, right? Friday morning is retrospective. The rest of the day is Slack. So we tell people, do whatever you want. Most people will use that time responsibly. But if they choose to go home, then fine. Yeah. So that's one way of kind of making it explicit. And then if the customer is like, well, wait a sec, why aren't you doing longer sprints? And I tell them, well, you see, this is like a machine, and we need to oil the machine sometimes, right? Or it breaks, right? So that's when we're oiling the machine. Find whatever language works for the customer. Yeah.